What's up, Tweener heads? Welcome back to another Friday Tennis Talk segment. Today we have Big Data Tennis as our special guest. So we're going to be talking about what he's been finding out, at least in the statistical world, about how players can match up against each other, as well as bold predictions about Serena Williams versus the top 10 seeds at the Indian Wells. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you're new, and make sure you check us out on all our social medias, as well as Big Data Tennis's socials down in the description. I hope to see you guys very soon. Enjoy. What's up, Tweener heads? Welcome back to another Friday Tennis Talk segment. I am here today with a special guest from Big Data Tennis, and today we're going to be talking about how he started his company and how he's gained somewhat of a big following so far, almost 10,000 followers on Twitter, as well as over 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much. It's Matthew Newell. Thank you, Philip, for having me.
No problem. Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to start with this question. How did you start Big Data Tennis?
So, it actually was one of those moments that it was, I think, May of last year.
Okay.
I've been I've been playing tennis forever, and have, because was a single white male in my 30s, played a lot of online poker before that was shut down. It was legally mandated back then.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court in the U.S. passed a ruling that the state of Nevada no longer has a monopoly on sports betting.
Okay.
And it was actually the state of New Jersey that had sued, and I went, oh my goodness, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
So then I started putting the pieces together to say, so wait a minute, like if you look at how marijuana has been legalized across the country, some people did it for medicinal reasons, some states did it for tax reasons, because all the states are needing more money, and I thought, holy cow, like states, it may take 3 or 4 years, but states are going to jump on this pretty quickly. And I just think we're going to get to a day where it's going to be like Powerball, where maybe you have 16 or 17 states who kind of pool together on some sites to say, this is legalized sports betting. And we all know how big sports betting is.
Of course.
In Europe and in the UK.
Oh, yeah.
And then I started looking under the details to say, well, what really surprised me was tennis is the second most bet on sport in the world. Really? Which,
wow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's nuts.
So, and I think it's for 2 reasons. Number one, there are, if you just look at the WTA and ATP, there are 126 official matches a year, which is, when you look at the NFL, it's a tenth of that.
Exactly.
Then you also have all the Challenger Tour and
ITF.
Yeah, all the ITF matches under, and then it's also similar to soccer or football.
Yeah.
It's international, so it doesn't matter if you're in Australia or Ohio. You've got some people who could be playing professional tennis that are from your country. So a lot of things just added up, and me and some friends just thought, hey, let's see what we can do.
Awesome, that's fantastic. And how would you? So you have a passion for tennis, correct?
Correct, absolutely.
Yeah, and how would you compare this to, say, the UTR system? How do you, what statistics do you use? Do you use it versus past records? I know UTR uses something similar to kind of complete the universal. Yep. Combined.
Yeah, that's right. UTR is we really like UTR. The interesting thing about UTR is I love how it flattened the system both for men and women, but it also flattened the system for aspiring college players versus pros. Like everyone's on the same rankings, which I think is great, and helps people engage in the sport and talk about where they are. The interesting thing is so our data goes back to, but first I'll talk about us and then I'll talk about us in relation to UTR.
Okay, great.
Our data goes back to 2008. So we have over 600,000 head-to-head matches in our database. And the first thing that we did was say, first of all, what what confidence level of accuracy do we want if we want to keep moving on with this? So we decided that we have to have at least 70%.
Yeah.
Then we started messing with all of the inputs to say, does height matter? Does country of origin matter? Does serve speed matter? Does surface type matter? We came up with, I'm not going to, give away exactly the secret sauce. But
That's fair. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're going to be they're between like 7 and 12 of the thousands of factors that we took into consideration.
Okay.
That got us to, when it's all said and done, we're about at an 82-ish% accuracy rate. So we were pleased with that. The one in relation to UTR that's interesting is the one that we really focus on is surface type, because we were
really
a little surprised. We also look at previous matches, but heads up between two players.
Yeah.
We also look at the last X amount of recent play with that player. If they haven't played in the last 6 months, that's going to be a lot different than if they've had a lot of success over the last 6 weeks.
Of course.
But surface type was huge, and so UTR, when you're looking at just two kind of naked UTR scores, doesn't take surface type into account.
Okay. And for the UTR, can you elaborate a little bit more on how you maybe differentiate yourself between them?
Yeah, I don't even think that they were set up to. They never really set themselves up. They really set themselves up more as a mirror and less as a predictor. Like if you watch a lot, Indian Wells is a really good example. They'll do before a match. They'll do, here's one person's UTR, and here's another person's UTR, and I haven't run the numbers, and maybe somebody UTR could correct me.
Yeah.
But it seems like it's basically a coin flip. Like you'll see a lot of people, who had a higher UTR who lost.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if they set that up. I think they just set it up to say, let's just take the entire world of tens of thousands of players and put it on one ranking system. Where ours is very specifically set up to say that that's all we do. And we actually did it in contrast to a lot of the so people who want to play fantasy tennis, we think it's a really good tool. Tennis enthusiasts who just want to have some fun, like watching the match, to say, oh, who's this crazy company who said that for example, Djokovic was that Kohlschreiber was gonna beat Djokovic a few days ago, and Kohlschreiber did beat Djokovic a few days ago. We really wanted to take the gut out of it and really just look at it from we don't care who these players are, we don't care what their history is, we're just going to look at the numbers, and it's just another data point as people are kind of having fun with tennis.
Awesome. That's what I love to hear. And I think one thing that I think a lot of people doubt when they read your numbers is, or maybe even question is, do you believe in these numbers 100% of the time?
That's exactly right. Yep. No, it's funny, and I'm sure we'll get to the Serena post in a second.
That was probably my next question.
So yes, you're absolutely right. We get that all the time, and it's part of the reason why we built in the confidence level onto the model. So we don't just say, of course, Kohlschreiber is going to beat Djokovic. Like, yeah, one, it doesn't really make sense. We put a confidence level, and actually in that specific case, we only had like a 50.55% confidence, which is basically a coin flip. Now, the sports bettors had Djokovic at 45 to 50% to win the whole thing. So if you put that in contrast, it gives a little nuance. So I do have faith. We get a lot. It's funny. We get a lot of criticism when it's basically a coin flip against a top player. Like, there's no way that some unknown from Serbia could be competitive against Halep. Or when it's like 98% confidence, and then the guy or girl shows up and they got food poisoning and play a terrible match. It's like,
exactly.
No, you guaranteed they were going to win. I'm like,
it just depends.
Exactly. In the margins, if you look at over the 600,000 matches that we have, and that includes recent matches all the way. I mean, the database updates itself multiple times per day, so it's still a 80+%, and it's easy to cherry pick. Hey, you got this one wrong, or you got this right, and I do the same thing. I cherry pick. We pick Kohlschreiber over Djokovic. So.
No, No, I thought that.
Ways.
Oh, of course. I mean, thankfully he did beat Djokovic on a bad day, and thankfully you predicted that right. And I think my next question, and I think you saw this coming in a sense, is the video that you made on Serena Williams. You predicted that she could beat 9 out of the top 10 players in the world on the men's tour.
Well, a little bit nuanced. 9 of the top 10 Indian Wells seeds.
Indian Wells seeds, excuse me. Thank you.
That's right. So a little bit.
Thank you for correcting me. And Barstool even wrote an article on you, and I read it, and people at this point think you might be a little bit crazy for saying that.
That's right.
And going back to the confidence thing, do you actually believe that she could beat the 9 out of the top 10 seeds? Because in my mind, it's like going back to the whole argument that John McEnroe had, I think like 2 to 3 years ago, of whether or not Serena could beat anyone on tour, or she can beat the number 750 in the world on the men's tour. It's one of the hardest things to believe.
It's true.
No offense to her, but it's just like
I totally understand. So it's a multi-layered onion. So let's start peeling back the onion.
Please.
Let's start with one. There are two sides of the conversation. There's the math side and there's the science side.
Yeah.
The math side being just based on numbers, no gut. Would it work? And then there's the science side of men versus women. So I'm not a specialist in the science side, but I will say that in sports parity, there are two sports that have the most amount of parity. When I say the most amount, I think it's less than 1% difference between men's performance and women's performance, and that's golf and tennis. And in some cases, depending on what year it is, there's actually complete parity. So I'll give you a good example. In 2015 at the U.S. Open, Djokovic throughout the whole tournament at the U.S. Open in 2015, the fastest serve on the men's side was Djokovic at 125. The fastest serve on the women's side was Serena at 126. So these are just, it's just part of the conversation.
Yeah.
That now on the math side, it gets a little tough because. Oh, and let me go back to the science side. One of the interesting things that they talk about on the science side is serve, just as I mentioned, serve speed. So a lot of the comments that we got was that someone like, how could Serena even return a single serve from Isner or Raonic or whoever? Well, the obvious answer to that is just like anyone else. I mean, people can return these serves. In fact, I was preparing for this, I was looking at some of the Indian Wells results from yesterday, and Ivo Karlovic got beaten by Dominic Thiem. I mean, it's, this isn't just because, but the serve speed, the science proves out that the serve speed is based really on two different things. Number one, the height of the serve, and then obviously the strength of the hitting power. Well, on the science side, the height, obviously, men in general are
stronger,
taller than women.
Sure.
And then the stronger part, like Venus actually is physically as strong as most of the men. So it does give them an edge, but, talking about just the serve being on the science side, the only predictive factor is like saying, well, if you've got the greatest pitcher in the world, that baseball team is going to sweep everything, because it's obviously a lot more complex than that. So
Can I ask you a question first?
Please.
In terms of baseball, are you saying that, like, let's say strength in like a pitcher in baseball versus softball, are you saying that they, like, a female pitcher and a male pitcher would have the same strength?
So that's really interesting, because in fact there was I'll reference. Hold on, I actually did my homework. There's a guy from here it is. There's a guy named Dr. James Andrews who, it said in a study of 11 male and 11 female elite baseball pitchers co-authored by the surgeon to the stars, Dr. James Andrews, the women were found to have a few significant differences in their baseball deliveries. Pitchers had shorter and more open strides and produced lower peak angular velocity. So in other words, women tend to be shorter, and have shorter limbs. But if that was narrowed, then the pitching difference would be narrowed as well. And again, that's on the science side. I'm speaking a little bit out of my realm of expertise.
Yeah, that's totally fine. But that's interesting that you would compare it to that, at least.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And again, I'll go back to just the fundamentals.
Yeah.
The pitcher is one part of the game. It's an essential part of the game. The interesting thing on the math side is, on the men's side and the women's side, from a rules perspective, because you've got baseball and you've got softball where the rules are different.
Oh, yeah.
From a rules perspective on the men's side, so when people say this is like comparing apples to spaceships, it's not even apples to oranges. We really are comparing, let's say, Granny Smith apples to, Red Delicious apples, because the only three main differences between the men's singles matches and the women's singles matches are, one, women never play best 3 out of 5.
Yeah.
But even then, men only do that for the Grand Slams, so
Yeah.
that's not a huge difference.
Of course.
The men have introduced, in some cases, a countdown clock. Well, I haven't done the research.
It's in both.
In both, I'm sorry. Yes, and correct me if I'm wrong, where they have introduced it, have they introduced it sporadically, like the girls maybe on one tour?
No, it's universal now. At least in the main tournaments for everyone, it's universal.
Gotcha. So that's actually removed. That's a constant. And then the coaches visit, where women are allowed once per set, I think it is. Mm-hmm. So those aren't. Besides that, it's the exact same sport. So it actually makes it easier to compare the two versus, one person said, made the metaphor. It's like you're comparing, just because you can win IMSA driving, that a NASCAR driver would beat the same person. It's like, well, no, those are different cars, different surfaces, different scenarios. So it's more apples to apples, I think, than people see.
Wow, that's just wow. I am just blown away, actually. Because it's interesting, because a lot of people I think don't take numbers into account, and I think when it comes to not only betting but just taking an analytical standpoint, I mean, have you seen the movie Moneyball, or have you heard the story?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Is there a way that you could compare that to a tennis standpoint?
Yes. So Moneyball, yes. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of similarities. I think there's one difference as I think about it. The similarity is the gut versus the numbers.
Yeah.
At first it was, that guy really looks like a pitcher and he really performs like a shortstop, mm-hmm. whereas the Moneyball player wanted to just statistically come up with the most bang for the buck and have a well-rounded team. I think the difference is baseball is so complex, which is kind of why I like especially singles tennis, and going back to the poker world, heads up, no limit hold'em, is there's so many fewer variables. You just have two players on one surface playing for X amount of sets. So
of course,
I do think there is no. Let me throw this in. Part of the reason why we published it last week is, on our website, you can only compare men to men, women to women. We actually, as I say in the video, we hacked it so just those of us behind the scene can look at the women to men, men to women. On a typical day, and again, the head-to-heads change every day because it takes daily maturations and actions into consideration. On a day-to-day basis, I was looking at it last night in preparation for this interview. I pulled up Osaka versus the top 10 Indian Wells male seeds, and she gets beaten by them all. I pulled up Halep, and I think Halep was competitive with 2, and she gets beaten by the rest. And we pulled up Serena before, and she gets beaten by most of them. This was just one of those times, and it's part of the reason why we did it now and didn't sit on it, is because 2 weeks from now, it may not be the same, but whatever was in the ecosystem, however the stars lined up, that day that we wrote the article and recorded the video, she would beat 9 out of the top 10 Indian Wells seeds.
So the numbers always change. It doesn't stay constant.
Always change. That's correct. Every day. That's exactly right.
So Well, tennis is a tricky thing in my mind because you always have people that can play well on a different day, and I think a lot of people don't understand that, like you said, not everything's constant. The numbers constantly change. The player always changes. The environment changes. So when it comes to the seeds, so Serena could actually lose to every top 10 depending on the tournament.
That's exactly right. Depending on the surface type, depending on her performance in the last X amount of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure we could find instances of someone on the, even when she's number one in the world, we could find an instance where number 179 on both the men's side and the women's side could, just by the numbers, could beat her on a particular surface type. So it's always changing. It's part of the reason why I think sports, or at least tennis fanatics like you and I,
mm-hmm.
love the sport, is because, I'll take Nadal as a good example. Everyone freaks out anytime we have a prediction that says someone will be competitive with Nadal on clay. Now, obviously, he's the king of clay, and no one has a better track record on a specific surface than him. That's undisputable. That said, 10% of the time, he still loses on clay. He's not losing to his twin brother. He still loses sometimes, and I think that's what's so exciting for us is
predicting
you still have to play the match. Exactly.
Yeah, predicting who he's going to lose to.
Exactly.
And I think one thing that I would love to find out from you and love to touch base on this after this interview is how Serena would do when she won 3 Grand Slams. I think, what year was it? It was 2015 or 2016 when she won 3 Grand Slams, and she lost in the U.S. Open to Panetta.
That's right.
I want to know what her chances would be that year against the top 10.
That's a great question. So, we're a new company, and
mm-hmm.
that's the kind of stuff that as we continue to build out
mm-hmm.
our capabilities, I call that the time machine. That's exactly right. Like, to be able to tell our model on this date how would things stack up, because I think that's what you just said is a really, really good example.
Yeah, and do you think you would do older players as well, like the McEnroe Agassi era and the Monica Seles era? Do you think you would be able to? We could with that time machine.
We could. It depends on when they play. We've got full statistics going back to 2018. We've got partial going back to 2008. We've got partial going back to 2006.
Okay.
But then we might be able to. It depends on how much data they physically didn't keep as much data back then as they do now, but we may be able to just kind of cobble together, those kind of predictions.
Awesome. So, and I love that. And I just wanted to say thank you again for joining us on today's podcast. And today's episode, I really appreciate it. I mean, this is a lot of interesting stuff and a lot of information to take in, honestly.
Yes. It's a many-layered onion, and when people talk about it, they come at it from a bunch of different angles.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, for us, it was just a fun intellectual exercise. There's a subset of sports fans and tennis fans who, I might as well have just, punched their dog in its throat when we publish that. And that's, that gets tricky. As you might know, having your own blog, there's not a whole lot of nuance in the internet. So I appreciate, Philip, the ability to have a more nuanced, layered conversation.
No problem. I'm glad you came on, and I'm glad I got to fully understand what you were talking about with the Serena video. And I hope to have you on again very soon. And I hope to have another conversation like this in the future. So
sounds great.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.